Hey everyone, today we are looking into the life of Veronica Franco, a famed Venetian courtesan and poet who managed to leave a lasting legacy through her work. However, after she was accused of being a witch, she lost her status and wealth and died in obscurity. Here we explore her life and her work. Veronica Franco was born into the cittadini class in 16th century Venice, most likely in 1546. It was the height of Venetian Renaissance culture, the age of Titian, the city's greatest painter, and the last master of the Renaissance style in Europe. Franco's family moved in the kinds of court circles where Titian and others were celebrated. The cittadini were the upper middle class of the city, who provided bureaucrats and magistrates for the Republic's complex bureaucracy. Franco's mother was a courtesan named Paola Fracassa. The cortigiana onezza, meaning an honoured courtesan, were effectively prostitutes, but highly cultured women whose clients were generally few in number, and in the case of late Renaissance Venice, were politicians, magistrates, and prosperous merchants. Many of these honoured courtesans could, for instance, play musical instruments, were literate and well-read, and could discuss poetry, literature, and art with their customers. They stood in direct contrast to other prostitutes who plied their trade near the Rialto Bridge in Venice and had a less discerning clientele. The position of an honoured courtesan was not an unusual one, and there were many courtesans at the royal courts of Europe's monarchies and around the government centres of city-states like Venice, Milan and Florence throughout the early modern period. Veronica learned the skills of an honoured courtesan from her mother when she was still just a teenager. However, she briefly experimented with marriage, and in the early 1560s, when she was still no more than 16 or 17 years of age, she married Paolo Panizza, a doctor in the city. This was an arranged union, one which Franco evidently did not take well to. As a result, she composed her first will in 1564, when she was still shy of her 20th year. Franco included a statement requesting Panizza to return her dowry. Franco would never remarry, though we know that she bore at least 6 children. However, only 3 of these survived beyond infancy. Thanks to her good reputation, as well as her links with many wealthy men in the city, Franco was able to afford to raise her children in good circumstances in her own household, and could even afford servants to help her. During the 1560s and 1570s, Franco rose through the ranks of Venice's notable honoured courtesans. It seems crude today, but in 16th century Venice, courtesans such as Franco were listed in catalogues, which described them and their traits for the many merchants and officials who visited the city. Already in 1565, shortly after her marriage ended, she was listed in the catalogue of all the principal and most honoured courtesans of Venice. This provided addresses and fees for courtesans like Franco in the city. Such catalogues were practical in a city which is believed to have been home to no fewer than 11,000 prostitutes and courtesans during the 16th century. Evidently, Franco was one of the most celebrated courtesans of her day by the late 1560s. When she set about composing a new will in 1570, the individuals who were listed as the executors thereof were from amongst the elite of Venetian society. For instance, one of these was Lorenzo Morosini, a member of the Venetian Council of Ten, which, along with the Doge, Venice's chief magistrate, effectively ran the merchant republic. Another was Ludovico Ramberti, a member of one of the most powerful merchant families of Venice. It seems likely that Ramberti was a prominent client of Franco's, as his own will, which he too had drawn up in 1570, generously bequeathed a house and some land near Venice to one of Veronica's children. Thus, while there is often a frustrating lack of detail about Franco's life, what the will of 1570 highlights was that as an honoured courtesan in her mid-20s, she was moving in circles of Venice's most powerful people and families, and that she was making enough money to establish herself as a lady of a prominent household herself in the city of St. Mark. In 1574, Franco briefly acquired her most famous client. In May of that year, King Charles IX of France died. He was succeeded by his brother, Henry, as Henry III. However, Henry was far away from his homeland, having been made King of Poland and Lithuania in Eastern Europe just months earlier. A long journey home thus ensued, during which he dropped by Venice and engaged in a brief 10-day liaison with none other than Veronica Franco. Years later, in 1580, she would compose a sonnet in which she remarked on her brief affair with the French king. The year after Veronica's brief fling with the French king, the bubonic plague struck much of northern Italy. The feared Black Death had never entirely disappeared after its first arrival in Europe, way back in the 1340s, and it continued to hit regions, with major outbreaks down to the end of the 17th century. Venice was particularly badly struck by the outbreak of 1575, one which lasted till 1578. During it, between 1/4 and 1/3 of the city's population, well over 100,000 people, were killed in the space of 36 months. In an age before effective medicine, quarantine was the only safety from the plague. Many of those who could afford it fled from cities like Venice when there was an outbreak, to avoid the cramped, overcrowded conditions in which disease spread like wildfire. Franco was amongst them, and she spent much of the next 2 years absent from the city, only returning in 1577, by which time the wave of the plague was beginning to subside considerably. When she returned, she discovered that her home was one of the many in the city which had been looted in the course of the epidemic. Through this, she had lost her household silver, jewels, books, and money, a sizable material setback, which equated to years of wages worth of goods for many Venetians at the time. What was doubly curious was that further robberies occurred at her home in the late 1570s, and over time, Franco began to suspect that her own household staff were complicit in these crimes. It was almost certainly owing to her financial setbacks of the mid-1570s that Franco wrote to the Venetian government in 1577, proposing that a new charitable home be established for impoverished former courtesans and prostitutes. She may have been influential in this, as an establishment was founded in the late 1570s, though she was not asked by the government to play any part in administering it. Veronica Franco is revered today as one of the greatest female poets and writers of Europe of the 16th century. Some of this was based on her background as a well-educated courtesan, but it was profoundly augmented in the early 1570s, when she entered the renowned literary salon of Domenico Venier, a scion of the powerful Venier oligarch family of Venice. Such literary salons were a staple of Europe's courts and cities in the early modern period, being something akin to a highly sophisticated book club. Franco became a literary advisor to members of Venier's salon. She also began composing her own extensive poetic work. These usually took the form of capitoli, a form of poem which was popular in the Renaissance world of the Mediterranean, notably in Italy and Spain. In 1575, just before the plague struck the city of St. Mark, Franco published an extensive volume of her own poetry entitled Terze Rime. This consisted of 25 poems, though 8 of these were composed by Marco Venier and another anonymous male author. The 17 poems of the collection, which Franco composed herself, discuss her life as a courtesan. Franco's engagement with her male customers is also dramatized in the capitoli, as the poems in the collection were all addressed to a specific man, each of whom presumably represented a former or current customer. In 1580, Franco published a further work. This was entitled The Familiar Letters, and was a compendium of letters between Veronica and some of her correspondents and lovers over the years. For instance, the first was written to King Henry III of France, with whom, as we have seen, Franco had a brief relationship back in 1574, while he was returning to France to become king there. It is unclear to what extent the Familiar Letters represents the actual correspondence she had with her male companions over the years, or to what extent these were all literary inventions. The familiar letters were published in 1580, right around the time that Franco was about to disappear from most official records. That year she was accused of witchcraft by her son's tutor, a man called Ridolfo Vanitelli, who claimed Veronica had practiced magical incantations in her home. This was a regular charge brought against courtesans in the early modern period, and Europe was just about to enter into the most brutal phase of the European witch craze, a period of intense witch hunts which saw approximately 40,000 alleged witches executed across the continent between 1580 and 1620. Vanitelli's charges involved a mix of common tropes concerning witchcraft and also slanders about her trade. For instance, in his denunciations, he referred to her as a public prostitute and a witch and a public whore, who invoked the devil and acted as an example for others who persist in wrongdoing. Elsewhere in his depositions, he affirmed that if this witch, this public masked and cheating prostitute, is not punished, many others will begin to do the same things against the Holy Catholic faith. Luckily for Franco, Italy did not have a major tradition of finding witches guilty following accusations, but this didn't mean she was in the clear just yet. Thankfully, with the help of some of her powerful connections, she was acquitted of her alleged crimes. While Franco escaped from the charges brought against her by Vanitelli, these events nevertheless saw her reputation damaged, and the combination of this and the losses of the mid-1570s led to financial and existential difficulties thereafter. All of this was compounded when her literary patron, Domenico Vernier, died in 1582. Thereafter, she largely disappeared from the historical record. She did not publish any further work that we know of, and her tax declaration of 1582 indicates that she was living in a section of Venice where many poverty-stricken former prostitutes spent their last years. When she died in 1591 in her mid-40s, it was the end of a life of one of the foremost female poets and courtesans of the Italian Renaissance. Thank you everyone for watching this video on Veronica Franco. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any suggestions, be sure to leave them in the comments, and I hope you guys are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.